Welcome back. I am John P. Today we're going to be talking about something that has been increasing a lot with watches. It's very unfortunate. There's a bit of a negative side to today's video. This is about watch robberies, watch thefts, and how they are increasing. But there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, sort of, in that I'm going to be sharing with you 5 tips that you can do with your watches to help prevent these robberies, which for the most part are targeted. But guys, before we jump into it, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com where we buy, sell, trade watches. We have so many different watches in stock. We've been working around the clock to bring you some very cool offerings for watches that are mostly geared towards enthusiasts. So if you are a watch enthusiast, make sure to check out delraywatch.com. So watch thefts and robberies. Now, this video was really inspired by a recent essentially complaint filed by a notable influencer, not in the watch community, but they essentially were at the Formula One Grand Prix. Many of you maybe saw the headlines. I won't mention them directly, but feel free to Google it. They were at the Formula One Grand Prix in Miami at one of the VIP experiences, and they were targeted for their Richard Mille watch. And this is a very rare Richard Mille watch, over 750,000 US dollars. So certainly such a score for the thieves. It's very obvious this is a very targeted theft, right? Someone would have to know how valuable that watch is. And this isn't a watch like a Rolex, which is kind of like universally recognizable. This has to be someone that is in the know to be able to target someone for this type of watch. And following kind of back from that event, just in the last 12 months, there have been reported over 6,000 watch robberies in just London alone. This is not considering the rest of the world. A large bulk of these have been Rolex watches, but keep in mind Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and Richard Mille seem to be the watches that the thieves are targeting. Now, another type of robbery that is happening is the thieves will go on mopeds or other kind of more nimble forms of transportation, and they will target you in your car, whether it's a convertible or something that's just so nice. They kind of make the gamble that maybe you do have a high-end watch on, and they will look into your window and they'll smash it out with a hammer, and either at knife point or machete or a gun, they will demand your watch. And I think people do give up the watch at that point, especially if you're at a red light. Maybe someone is in front of you, and it might not seem like anything out of the ordinary, especially in South Florida. You see, they do zigzag in and out of traffic. The motorcycles, the mopeds, so on, those types of drivers, they just zigzag out. So it wouldn't be totally out of the normal, hey, why someone might be right there outside of your window. But this has been happening a ton. You can see all the news sources and stations talking about this. But this also happens in restaurants a lot. Restaurants in high-end areas. You see this happening in places like Los Angeles, in Miami, as well as other places in the country. But this seems to be the place where people get a little more flashy with their watches and wear these ultra high-end pieces. And criminals will run into a restaurant, they'll scope it out. Maybe someone will be there and they'll send a text to someone outside, and then they'll run in with their weaponry and they'll demand the watches. And they'll score these once again, AP, Patek Philippe, Richard Mille, and Rolex watches. So it's so important to note that these are targeted by professionals that are probably even watching videos like this to brush up on their watch knowledge so that they can more accurately target these types of robberies. It's not just for the gold watches anymore. They know their horology. They know where the big scores are. It's more risk reward. And there have been many reports and those that are looking into this, different law enforcement agencies, where this is, these are, jewelry theft rings. Many of them from different parts of the world, they travel around and they make these targeted thefts because it's such a large payoff. So if they have to travel around, if they're getting a $750,000 watch, that is a big score for professional criminals. So it's something to keep in mind. These are not just people that are, like homeless people or people that are, hopped up on something out on the streets that just kind of rob you for what you have. No, they are specifically targeting certain types of people, watch collectors that have these big score watches on their wrist. Now, let's not even forget about what they call these Black Widow robberies, where essentially you might be sitting at a restaurant or a bar and someone will put something, like GHB or one of these kind of, these drugs in your drink so that you get like woozy or something like that. And, they take the watch off your wrist in that way. And I was speaking with essentially a collector recently, and they were traveling, and I won't say where in the world, but they were being approached kind of by women that were a little bit flirty and things like that. And, they were kind of touching their wrist and things. And they thought, oh, maybe they were just kind of hitting on them or something along those lines. But they were so good at taking the strap, unbuckling the strap of the watch, and then leaving that they didn't even feel it missing on their wrist. And that is unbelievable. People are practicing around the clock to take your watch. And this is something that I know is so easy to kind of overlook and say, oh, my neighborhood is safe. But largely this is happening in safe neighborhoods, ironically enough. Now, this is interesting in that we have to keep in mind that there's only so much that you can do, right? If you're a watch collector, you want to wear your watches, that's understandable. And so the first thing that I do want to stress and really urge is to make sure that you insure your watches. If you do get in this situation, unfortunately, you don't want to have to even be thinking of, do I risk it? Do I fight for it? What do you do? That's up for everyone to decide circumstantially. I mean, that's up for you to decide what you do at the end of the day, but at least get your watches insured. You can do this either through some type of renter's policy, homeowner's policy. Perhaps you already have certain type of jewelry insurance for your significant other, or they also currently sell specific watch collector insurance out there. There's different companies that offer this, whether it's Jewelers Mutual or some of the others. If you've been on different watch websites, there are many different offerings. So I would do that first. Get your watches insured. It's unfortunate how many messages we do receive every year from collectors that say, hey, here's my serial number. If you get these, please watch out. And this goes the same for dealers as well. It happens to dealers. Some dealers, they don't wear watches anymore. I have to be honest with you. This isn't, every dealer, but some dealers who, do have concern of maybe being targeted, maybe in the cities where this has been happening a little bit more. They just don't wear watches, right? They don't want to stand out. And that has been working seemingly pretty well, right? They can't, rob you for a watch on your wrist if you don't have one to take. But what you can do, let's talk about the tips here, is if you have a Rolex watch that you want to wear, I might even recommend that if you don't necessarily love it on the Oyster bracelet or the Jubilee, why not put it on something like an aftermarket strap, for example, like a canvas strap. This isn't exactly why I do it, but I have a vintage Rolex 1016 Explorer here on a canvas strap, but I think it's actually just more comfortable on the canvas strap. But I know many people that do that. They put it on the rubber, and it is just such a recognizable style, that Jubilee bracelet or the Oyster. So avoid that as a tip if this is something you're looking to do. Now, you can also wear long sleeves or a jacket. Now, I know this seems kind of silly to even mention, but once again, these are targeted. They're looking at your wrist, whether it's in a nice restaurant or a coffee shop. It's very orchestrated because the payoff is high, risk versus reward. So why not tuck it under your cuff if you can, if you're going to be wearing one of these recognizable brands, the Pateks, the APs, the Richard Mille, or the Rolex. Why not? Why not save yourself the trouble? Now, obviously, these brands that I just mentioned, they're clearly the target. So if you do have other watches in your collection that you like and you enjoy, why not wear them a little bit more too? If it's some place that you're going that's going to be very public, think like a festival or something where it might be difficult to keep track of your surroundings, right? If you go to a concert or you go to something like the Formula One Grand Prix, there's going to be a lot of people around. Security's not going to be too targeted unless you have your own private security, in which case, don't watch this video. You have better things to do with your time if you're traveling around with an entourage of private security. But if you're like everyone else, essentially, it can be difficult to keep track of your security. And just like I mentioned, they have these people that can really just pull them off your wrist without you even knowing. I know it's kind of that thing, oh, not me, until it happens. And then when it happens, we get messages from collectors at Delray Watch that say, hey, look out for this watch. So it does happen. You just have to take my word for it. With this point here, why not, put a watch on your wrist that's maybe not as cash convertible? That's kind of the whole point here, is these watches need to be cash convertible, that are being targeted. They need to be ultra desirable because of the way that these criminals have to kind of introduce them into different parts of the world where they might not be running serial checks, and they might get a higher premium because the watches are so in demand. Whereas if they took that Omega watch or a Roger Dubuis, for example, there's a limited number of buyers that are going to be willing to pay for these types of watches. And last the flashier watches tend to be the ones that are also being targeted as well. Outside these hot brands, which I just spoke of, rose gold and yellow gold watches in other brands are also being targeted. You know, think Hublot watches or anything else for that matter. Gold has value in the melt weight. So even because of the serial numbers, if those watches cannot be sold by these, these thieves, they can still melt down the watches for that gold value, right? If you're walking down the street just waving around a, essentially a gold bar, would you do that? Like, why would you do that? And if your watch is gold, I totally understand it. You like it. I'm a watch collector and a watch geek as well. But if you do want to protect yourself to the most extent, to the most extreme here, why not avoid the rose gold and the yellow gold if that's something that you're looking to do, or follow the other tips. I think they're all very valid. And I know, like I said, many people have started, picking up on some of these tips, including some dealers, just because of the unfortunate circumstance with watches being more of an asset today than they were in the past, and more targeted criminals focusing on these things. So what do you guys think? Do you have any experience with this? It's kind of a bummer to talk about, but I do think it's important for us as collectors to kind of band together and stay vigilant because, hey, it seems there is currently a target on collectors' backs for these things. So why not stick together and follow some of these tips and stay safe? So guys, let me know what you think about this video in the comments below, and we'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.